we will be discussing metals, nonmetals, and metalloids. In our previous lesson, you guys learned about elements and compounds. You learned what an element was and what a compound was. We now know that an element is a pure substance composed of only one type of atom. We know that a compound is also a pure substance composed of two or more elements. Now we're going to discuss metals, nonmetals, and metalloids. Previously, you've been shown periodic tables. I mentioned before that periodic tables of elements can come in various different colors. Now I'm going to explain to you what those various colors mean. This is an example of a periodic table of elements. As you can see, there are various colors for the different elements. For today's lesson, we're going to be looking at this particular periodic table of elements. As you can see above, there's a key labeled metals, metalloids, and nonmetals. Each of these different colors represents a different category of elements on the periodic table of elements. What do these categories mean? These categories simply mean that these particular elements have certain characteristics or properties. You're going to learn what those different characteristics or properties are. Let's begin with metals. Here we have metals. Located on the left side of the periodic table, metals are mainly solids. They have a shiny luster, which means when you shine a light on them, they reflect that light. They are malleable, which means they can be easily bent without breaking, or they're moldable. They're also ductile, which means they can be drawn or bent or pulled into thin wires. They are good conductors, and they have low boiling and melting points. That means it doesn't take much temperature for them to heat up because they are good conductors. You should be familiar with this word conductor from 5th grade. So these are good conductors of electricity, metals. Some examples of elements that are metals are gold, element Au, silver, Ag, or lead, Pb. And as you can see on the periodic table, the elements are located on the left side of the periodic table with the exception of hydrogen here, but they're located primarily on the left side of the periodic table of elements. Next, we have nonmetals. Nonmetals are located on the far right side of the periodic table. No matter what color they are, they're always going to be located on the far right side of the periodic table, as shown in this circle here. Nonmetals are located on the far right side of the periodic table. They are mainly made up of gases. They are poor conductors or insulators. So they will be considered poor conductors, or you can say they're good insulators. They are brittle, which means if they are hit with a hammer or a hard object, they break easily or shatter easily. They are dull, so they are not shiny. When you shine a light on them, they will not reflect. And they have a high boiling or melting point. An example of a nonmetal would be like carbon. So carbon, a real world example of carbon would be coal. So if you look at a piece of coal, it is dull. It's not shiny. When you hit it with a piece of hard substance, it can break or shatter into pieces easily. Some more examples of nonmetals are these gases here. Helium, which is found in balloons. Nitrogen, like the gas that's in liquid nitrogen or dry ice. And oxygen, a gas that we're all familiar with that we breathe. These are some examples of nonmetals. And like I mentioned, they're located on the far right side of the periodic table. They may vary in color, but they're always located on the far right side of the periodic table. Next, we have metalloids. Metalloids can be a bit tricky. Metalloids are located between metals and nonmetals on the stair step. So if you look here in this little oval shape, you can see these elements that's located on a little stair zigzag line here in green. These are our metalloids. The metalloids is the smallest group on the periodic table. They are located between the metals and the nonmetals as shown here. Properties Metalloids have properties of both metals and nonmetals. So what that means is some metalloids can be shiny, some can be dull, some can be brittle, some can be malleable, which means some can break easily, or some may be able to bend or mold. They can have properties of both metals and nonmetals. Metalloids are often called or referred to as semiconductors. So they have properties of both metals and nonmetals, and they are considered semiconductors. They are located on the stair step between metals and nonmetals. It's difficult to find visual examples of metalloids, as metalloids consist of boron, silicon, arsenic, which are typically poisonous gases. But just know that metalloids are located between metals and nonmetals. They are found on the stair step. They are semiconductors, and they have properties of both metals and nonmetals.